Matt, during our lecture today, you were making the point about how music in corporate worship creates a space appropriate for an encounter with God. And one of the ways it did that was by opening us to the trans-rational, to the emotional, to the spiritual experience. How does music do that, and how do you do music so it creates the possibility of that?
Yeah, so my hunch is that we have some intuitive sense of this, that music has this sort of character that you can't really talk about. As someone once said, writing about music is like dancing about architecture. There's something about music that precisely is going to frustrate any attempt to describe it in language. There's something that goes beyond language. It's maybe its own sort of language, but it's not a language like the others that we know. It has content, but it's sometimes hard to define what it is. We can think of David playing music to soothe Saul. Music has these effects on us. It can move us, and you can have an experience with a piece of music and have a hard time describing it afterwards. Even what was it about? Maybe it's not about anything. You maybe add the aboutness to it and whatever you were thinking about when you heard that piece of music. And I think offers a real important corrective to us. I think as modern, post-Enlightenment Westerners, we can get caught up in our own heads and trip ourselves up that way. Kind of thinking too much that it's about figuring it out, that it's about kind of puzzling things through, and that I have to be able to give reasons for everything and be able to explain myself. And music offers a different sort of real experience that shapes our character, our wants, our desires, our loves. So it's profound and has real content in that sense. But we can kind of get ourselves out of the way in a certain sense. And so that's why for me, being in a charismatic tradition, I've always thought of this kind of transrational mode that music operates as being very similar to how charismatics like to talk about speaking in tongues. That there's this kind of expression that the Spirit kind of speaks in us and through us that kind of, Paul talks about it can be dangerous for this reason, it kind of bypasses the mind. And so I shared in the lecture this passage in Romans in which Paul talks about the Spirit interceding with groans that are deeper than words. I think we need that. I think we encounter that in our lives. There have been really, really important moments in my life where, in processing the recurrence of a friend's cancer, a friend my age who had ended up passing away when he was 26. When I first found out his cancer was back 4 years before he eventually passed away, I remember just evenings of just not being able to really process what was happening. And I would just sit in the dark in our living room in our attic apartment, and I would just play the guitar, just the same riff, 16 notes again and again and again and again and again and again. And there's something about that felt like, I wonder if this is what Paul's talking about when he talks about speaking in tongues. There's something happening here. I don't feel entirely in control of it. That feels good, actually, to not quite be in control of it. It's cathartic. And it's helpfully displacing my own rationality that runs the show that ends up running the show way too much. And so I think music has that kind of power for us. And for those of us, maybe especially those of us who are in academia, but I think for all of us, like I said, I think we have a culture that's a pretty rationalistic culture. The last 500 years have been rather rationalistic. It's helpful to have something that kind of decenters that a bit and puts us in a place where we aren't the centers of our own universes in that way.